And we're live.
We're live.
Casper Steinfath. Welcome back to the Sup Racer podcast.
Why are you saying welcome back?
A little bit of deja vu here, isn't it? I feel like we've done this recently.
I had this dream that, I was in a similar situation, sitting across from you at a table, mic'd up. But, who knows? Maybe it was just a dream.
I don't remember the whole thing. So, no, we actually did this a couple of days ago. And we had a few issues with audio and wine-related technical problems. So we're back to do it again. The first episode of Paddlecast. We're now here in Copenhagen. The other day we were over on the west coast in cold Hawaii. We'd just watched your film premiere. We're here to watch another film premiere in Copenhagen, the Skagerrak film, which is a fascinating movie about your crossing from Denmark to Norway. How's it feel? We're going to go tonight to the Grand Theatre in Copenhagen.
Right, yeah. It's
200 odd people.
Nothing has really changed for me since, or not a whole lot has changed since the previous premiere in cold Hawaii. I still feel like I'm running on this wave of energy. It's kind of like runner's high. Just everything is magical right now. And we had an epic premiere. We had a very, very nice premiere in cold Hawaii where, I got to show the film, not just for you, but 250 other excited Danes. And it's very special to share this story that's been, that happened over a year ago. But and now we're sharing it again here in Copenhagen, and it's emotionally a very, I would say, overwhelming time for me.
Tell us about the film. Now, if anyone hasn't read the review on Sup Racer, personally, I found it fascinating because it was the story about you paddling from one country to another across this gnarly strait of water. But it went a lot deeper than that and kind of touched on these whole themes about, not necessarily the meaning of life, but the search for something bigger in life. Let's not get too crazy and spiritual about it, but there was definitely something a lot deeper than just paddling.
Yeah. No, if anyone ever finds the meaning of life, please call me up. But no, the film has been a long time in the works. The whole Skagerrak, or as I used to call it, the Viking crossing, was a project that started many years ago for me. It was a dream of crossing this wild ocean. But I made a first attempt at crossing across the legendary ocean between Denmark and Norway called Skagerrak. I tried to do it in 2017, so 2 years ago. The first attempt was a complete, disaster. Where I set out on February 1st, early in the morning. It was dark when I started. And essentially, I failed 16 hours later. I was so close to the freaking coast in Norway.
You could see it, right?
I could literally see, the lighthouse in Kristiansand that I was aiming for. It was this tower out in the horizon that was just looking at me in the dark. And I felt like I was in Lord of the Rings looking at the tower of Sauron near Mount Doom. But basically, I'd reached a point that no matter how hard I paddled and how hard I fought, there was an ocean current and a storm brewing that just was pushing me the other direction. So just like a scene out of Deadliest Catch, I was reeled back on board the safety boat and brought to safety because, look, there's no way I was going to make it. So the film, Skagerrak, that's premiering now, and that'll be available around the world really soon, it shows the time. It's not just about the crossings, but the time in between the first attempt and the second attempt 1 year later where I succeeded. It shows all the preparations, all the reflection about this failure that happened, and how do you deal with failure in life, among other themes. And I could sum it up really quick, but I feel I could go off on a tangent talking about what the trip actually was for me. And that's why it's so cool to be not just talking with you, but later today, listen to how people interpret this film, because there's not just one way to do it.
Yeah, that's what I really like about Skagerrak, because you can actually get something, you can get a meaning out of it, like a message out of it. It's not just entertainment, it's not just some kind of action sport movie. There's actually very little action in the whole thing. The whole sequence of you crossing is relatively short. It's an hour-long movie, and there's maybe 10 minutes dedicated to the actual crossing itself. The rest of it is just the insanely intense preparation, physical, mental, just logistics itself, which I thought was really interesting because the first crossing was heavily funded. The second one you basically did on a shoestring.
Yeah.
And that, to me, it made it you tell us, but it looked a lot more raw, a lot more honest, and a lot more hard work as well.
Yeah, like a lot of people followed the second attempt, and I really want to, you got to look at the first attempt to understand why things were like they were. And at first it was a pure Red Bull project, as we had a big budget to work with, and we're really trying to make this happen. We failed, and then I guess I realized part of the thing when I failed the first time was I was working on this crossing on the completely different premise, the wrong premise. I was kind of cocky, thinking that it's just going to be a walk in the park and I'm going to paddle 130 kilometers across this ocean. I cooped it, and I totally, I was slapped in the face for that reason. So also when we looked at doing the second attempt, I also realized I have to bring this project into my own hands, and I got to do it on my premise. I can't feel, I can't bow down to the pressure of feeling that I have to do it within a certain amount of time. I need the right conditions, and I need the right people.
Yeah.
And that's where the local community came together. Denmark is a small nation. Where I live in cold Hawaii is an even smaller subculture, where we found out that, actually for me the most interesting was I found out we have such skilled people in this area. We have some of the best captains in the world, some of the best navigators, lifeguards. It became a family project that was what made it really special for me. That it was not a hyper professional thing we put together. It was just a group of people that had a strong passion and a strong skill set at what they did.
Yeah, I like to compare Klitmøller to Hobbiton in The Lord of the Rings. It's just this sleepy little village where everyone's really friendly and mellow, but amazing things happen there, as it did in the books. So I think it's kind of cool. And to me, what I thought was really fascinating was that it was this redemption story. You did fail, and you wanted to succeed, and you wanted to go all out to succeed. But through the movie, you realized it was kind of we were going on a journey with you as you discovered there was something more to it. And there's that classic scene I wrote about with your mum where she's basically saying, why'd you do this? Why are you doing this?
She could not see the reason why I was doing this.
And the thing was, you were responding I hate it when people just think of me as an extreme athlete, or that it's just for the adrenaline or whatever.
Adrenaline junkie.
I understand why I'm doing this, and there's a deeper meaning, but you couldn't articulate that meaning.
I was so pissed. And then that's one of the early scenes in the film was kind of talking to my mother about why I did it. And it was kind of true, because in the beginning of the film, I could not put into words what drove me and why the hell I was doing this. Of course, there were some basic things. I wanted to see if, I could do this, cross this ocean. But it was actually only towards the end of the film that I became aware of maybe the deeper meaning of it. And it's a classic mom. We all have a mom that's oh, little boy, you fell down. Let me be worried for you.
Yeah.
So I think she's a very strong character in the film also, because she's worried and scared, but she's also supportive and encouraging. But she encourages reflection. And when we talk about safety, and she says, oh, I thought you guys were totally aware of everything. You got it dialed. And then she became even more scared when I told her that maybe we didn't. So
there wasn't a doctor on board?
No. But I think my mom is a character that also helps the film appeal to a broader audience. Because Skagerrak is not a surf film. It's not a stand-up paddle film. It's a film that myself and Peter, the director, believe can appeal to anyone that has faced adversity or, adversity in their life. And it's just, I don't know. I'm really curious to see how people receive the film, and that's obviously why I'm so nervous again right now, sitting here before the next premiere.
Are you going to cry again in those two scenes? You told me the other day there's two scenes where you cry every time you watch this.
There are two particular scenes, and I'm still trying to understand why. One of them is I'm sitting in the car about to embark on my journey. It's 1:00 in the morning on the second attempt. And I'm sitting in the car being driven to the beach, and this Australian guy, Dean Darby, he's driving the car. And he just kind of came on last minute as a driver to help with logistics. And he didn't understand what really was going on when someone told him that Casper's actually paddling to Norway now. No, you're kidding me. like, this is gnarly. And just the way his honest reaction brought me to tears when watching it, because it was so hectic to be in that moment for me, realizing that, you know, there's a big ocean out there and people are expecting me to go out and conquer this.
Yeah.
And then the second scene is at the arrival in Norway, where, you know, I didn't know at the time, I didn't know what was happening in terms of media exposure and stuff. Like, I was just focused on paddling. And then basically when I got to the beach in Norway, there's this whole entourage of, what do you call it, like this gathering of photographers, journalists,
it was like
TV
the finish line of some Olympic event or something. The flashes
like,
going off everywhere.
There was like 30 different journalists or media people.
You had big news TV cameras in your face, all the bright lights.
And the scene that makes me cry is when like the camera is panning along the coast and basically see me in the foreground paddling towards those cameras.
So when you go past the boat and like everything appears.
It's
very
calm,
cinematic.
beautiful. And then there's these flashes from the beach. There's these flashes from the cameras. And I swear, like, especially when you watch the film with good sound, it feels like these cannons. It's these snipers just like taking me out. So when I was sitting in the cinema the other day watching the premiere, I felt like every time a flash went off on that scene, I was being thrown way back into my seat. And I started crying, and it was the biggest moment of my life, I felt.
Yeah.
And it brought me right back into that mindset of, holy shit, this is fucked up.
Yeah, I think that's it's clearly a very emotional thing for you. Like, it's clearly a very meaningful thing is probably a better word. This means a lot to you.
Well, the reason I think it means a lot to me is because, and that's also why I continued crying during the, what do you call it, the end titles at the end of the movie, because it was the people that were part of this journey. Like, look, I'm Casper Steinfath, I'm a world champion, and I love paddling. But there's no way I could get across that ocean without the support of all these people. So
you took like 30 people up on stage to say thank you. There's probably twice as many out there. Like, it was a massive group effort, this.
There's roughly there's 15 people on the water helping, and then there was a lot of people around that as well. You had probably another 15 involved in the actual making of the film.
It's a well-made film, huh?
It's a well-made film, and Peter Alstead, obviously wanted to go all in terms of, like, getting the good soundtrack, the great color grading. I was not really a part of that, but I was still overwhelmed when I saw how the hell can
PG-18.
How can my dream, like my personal egotistical dream, all of a sudden include all these people?
Yeah.
Why are they here? So it was like I was humbled.
Yeah.
And overwhelmed by thankfulness that why would you want to be part of this?
Yeah.
Which I don't want to spoil too much about the film, but it's also very much about asking for help.
Yeah.
I think we can all relate to that we need help at some point or another in our lives from other people.
Yeah. No, I think it's a beautiful thing, and that's something a lot of people realize as they're going through life. I know I realized it recently.
You had that burnout.
Yeah, man, I mean, it's been an interesting time in the sport, really, just in general. There's so much going on, and I feel like we're at this, not even a fork, it's just like we're blooming in some way. It's a very beautiful thing, it's a very chaotic thing, confusing at sometimes, but for me, it's a really exciting time. And yeah, you mentioned that burnout thing, and I wrote that big story that I think one or two people actually got to the bottom of it, which...
I fought my way to the bottom.
Man, you deserve a medal. That's like harder than crossing the Skagerrak, finishing one of my stories. But no, I think that was a big thing about the burnout, was that I was doing too much. And everyone around me could see I was doing too much. And I've always had this very stubborn personality where, I just don't like asking for help. And I think that was one of the big things I learned, was that it's not just okay to ask for help and rely on other people. Like, you're being selfish. You're basically being selfish if you don't be a little bit selfish. Like, if you try to take on too much, if you try to do it all yourself, if you don't ask others to contribute, that's actually more selfish, because you're just going to burn yourself out. Then you're no good to anybody.
Then it doesn't work.
The other side of it is, I think the beauty in life is sharing things with others. And that's one thing I got from the film, was that, I mean, you could have tried to be He-Man and do this all on your own, but A, it wouldn't have worked.
No.
And B, it would have been selfish because you gave an opportunity for others to experience this in their own way. Even if they weren't paddling, like I spoke to your navigator, your captain, and he was so excited to be part of this. Like for him, it was a big personal achievement to be involved, even though he wasn't paddling. He did have a very important job. But it's that kind of thing, like you've created something so much bigger than yourself.
And sometimes I think we forget that as humans. Like it's the dreams of individuals that actually create meaningful events in life for other people.
Yeah.
Like if you take it, let's take a couple of steps back a second here, and like if you look at the process of evolution, of how we as a society are here where we are now. It's like if the young people always listened to the authority, to the older people, or to what the norm of life is, and we don't step outside of this comfort zone, then there would never be a progression. And it's like it's whether it's in like a tribal society, like if a young kid never took a chance and maybe went outside, tried to see what was outside the village, you wouldn't have discovered stuff. Like it's also, youth and stupidity go hand in hand, but it's also what brings us forward. And like when people call me an idiot for trying to cross the ocean, I know that everyone's not going to agree with this.
And a few people did call you an idiot, especially even online.
Last night, people called me an idiot. Like on the forums,
still going.
There was a newspaper that published this online piece last night, and like they were just saying like, "Man, you have such a mental illness. You should seek help." And it's funny. But what I see also is like because I had this dream, all of a sudden it wasn't just my own dream anymore. Because some people felt it was cool, and it had meaning for them. So like whether it was the captain or the photographer Frederick, for example, that was along, he came up to me afterwards and like said this was one of the most exciting adventures of his life, and I felt so bad because like he's one of the best sports photographers in Scandinavia, and I didn't have budget to pay him for his actual work, and I really wanted to, but
sounds like Trevor.
It's kind of like, we can all.
On the valley to the paddle league.
Here comes Trevor into the picture again. But basically, look, dreams. One person's dreams can actually fuel all kinds of new dreams inside other people, and that's what the crossing kind of taught me. Is by asking for help, I actually gave something to other people as well.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to maybe grasp completely, but the premiere showed me that, wow, we did something amazing together.
So what's it like being from Denmark, a country where there's absolutely no real prominent history of surfing or anything? And you mentioned like some people were saying you've clearly got a mental illness if you want to paddle from Denmark to Norway. And there's a funny scene in the movie where your friends are reading out the online comments, and there's some serious trolls out there. But I think it's not even they're not even just trolling you, it's just they don't understand. And it's so far outside the mentality of the traditional Scandinavian society. We talked about the other day how I love Scandinavia. I lived here for 5 years. I think it's the coolest place in the world. But it's got an odd mentality where you're supposed to stay inside the box, right? It's
hard to stay in. It's not encouraged that you go outside the box.
Yeah.
Where we have this, like if you just look at the ocean, for example, like where I grew up in Denmark, there was always a very big fear of the ocean, especially because it was fishermen that used it as a workplace, and it was not viewed as a recreational space. That changed when surfing came about, and but it's still a conflict to this day. Like, what are you doing out there? The Danish society, it's not just Danish. Like it's many places in the world, but there's just these norms in society. Like when most people look at extreme sports athletes, they look at you as crazy, or that you just have a death wish. Like, what's wrong with sitting in front of the TV, Friday night watching X Factor or something? It's hard for me to describe, but basically the way to describe what we call the Yenta Law in Denmark. It's this unwritten law that we kind of grow up with, where say you're sitting in a classroom and the teacher's asking you a classic question. Who can answer this? And you know the situation when you kind of look around at each other and like no one's really saying anything, and you might actually have the answer, but because of the social context, no one else is raising their hand, but should I? And that's like,
you don't want to show that you're smarter than anyone else.
You don't want to show that you're smarter. You don't want to stick out because it affects the social structure of like, well, then Casper's going to be this nerdy guy, or Casper's going to be so different.
Like he thinks he's better than us.
Exactly. And it's
basically everyone's supposed to be even.
It's a very flat model.
Which is good in many ways. Like it's good to have an egalitarian society where everyone is equal and there's not these crazy caste systems, but it hits a ceiling, I feel like.
I'm not going to say it's perfect or it's the worst. Denmark is a really nice place. I can just feel that I like doing weird stuff. I like being the person that'll raise my hand and say something completely messed up. I get a kick out of it.
Yeah.
Like getting a kick out of like, okay, last night this article came out about, it was a review of the film, and these guys start commenting about like mental disorder I have. We even got like flat earth theory in there. Like somehow I got involved in the flat earth conspiracy.
Did you get some anti-vaxxers?
It was something about like, well, I forget it, but basically it's fun to stick out. It's fun to take chances.
What was the I'm curious how the hell they brought flat earth theory into.
Well, I think there was someone that was saying, maybe it was someone trying to debunk the flat earth theory, in the sense that like, well, if it was a flat earth, you should be able to see the Norwegian mountains much earlier or something. And then some flat earthers got back saying that, I gotta read the comments. I gotta think about it. Like,
flat earth, wouldn't the ocean just be a big lake? Why would there be all these crazy currents?
Well, essentially, yeah, wouldn't the ocean like be the outer rim? Like kind of like if we're living.
How are we even discussing? How does anyone even believe?
Why are we talking about the flat earth?
How does
theory
anyone
right now?
believe that it's just an insane thing? I swear it's coming up way too often these days.
Did you watch the Netflix?
It's scary.
Did you watch the Netflix series or the film Behind the Curve?
No, about this.
Check it out. It's a documentary about the flat Earth theory, where there's actually you give the theorists give the flat earthers time to share their thoughts and their theories. Is really entertaining also, like from both sides. Like you can say like these are complete idiots, or you can say like I actually believe the Earth is flat.
Yeah, but I'm not sure what else you can say about people that think the Earth's flat.
But either way, I'm honored to have been involved in a big conspiracy theory.
Wow, there you go. So speaking of weird things, how did you get into this weird little sport of ours? Oh, especially coming from Denmark, man. I mean, come on.
Where to start? I mean,
you did have a pretty unorthodox upbringing, though.
I grew up.
You're Danish, but you're not fully Danish.
So, my dad is from California. My dad spent a lot of his life in his early days traveling around surfing. He had a passion for big waves.
He had a passion for Indo.
He had a very strong passion for Indonesia.
Explorer.
He was, living on a boat for many years, going between G-Land and Desert Point, just surfing his brains out.
I think I want Mike on the podcast next.
You should get
the stories he was giving us last night, man.
If you get him on the beer and like he starts opening up, it's very interesting. But he met my mom in Bali in the early 90s, and then they got together, and I kind of came about, and there was Klitmøller, Denmark was like the compromise between inland Denmark and California. So I grew up on the West Coast, but my parents had this lifestyle of my dad was self-employed, so they traveled a lot, whether it was searching for waves or snow. And my brother and I kind of grew up in this lifestyle where we lived all across the world.
Yeah.
We had Denmark as a base, but we traveled a lot. As a kind of like birds fly around the world to find the right conditions for them to live. Or like nomads, you could call it that. But basically I got into surfing, and the water was my passion. And then I was really into competitive shortboarding in my early teens. And I wanted to be the next Kelly Slater. I looked up to like a lot of those top guys. But I also, when I got like 13 or 14, I was kind of burning out already. And it sounds really weird, like, it's definitely not.
Did you write a long post on MySpace about?
Yeah, I don't know what I did, but it was definitely not like an adult burnout. But basically, I think the culture didn't excite me as much. Like I went to some contests, and it was just everyone was so serious.
Yeah.
And that's when I went. I was on the surf trip. And your question was, how do I get into stand-up paddling? We're on the surf trip in Portugal on the island of Madeira in like 2007. And, the waves were flat. We were going completely crazy. And my Uncle Tim was there, the grandfather of stand-up paddling in Scandinavia, we call him, because he had a stand-up board with him. And all of a sudden, it's flat and he's paddling around the beach. He's wearing a pair of shorts. He has a Hawaiian shirt on. He's got his sunglasses, straw hat, fake cigar in his mouth. And he looks like the biggest dork in the world. And he's paddling.
What year was this, you reckon?
This was early 2007.
Yeah.
And, we tried the board and I just thought it looked stupid, really. But then when you paddle, it was a very engaging experience. And long story short, take the board home to Denmark. It's flat. The waves are flat the whole summer, and I end up paddling around a lot. And from stand-up paddling being this bad joke and like surfing being my main passion, the whole thing kind of reversed. Where like all of a sudden stand-up paddling was all I could think about.
You got hooked on the cult, huh?
I got
a few of us.
I got injected by the virus.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough one to break.
But it opened up new doors. Like stand-up for me came about as just another way to be on the water. And I could all of a sudden be out there in all kinds of conditions. Windy or not, waves or no waves, rain, snow or sunshine. It was perfect.
Yeah, and you had a pretty meteoric rise, I'd say, because we actually raced together, I think 2011. We were like two of the only people in Scandinavia. I was living in Sweden, you were next door in Denmark. There were very few people in the entire region of Scandinavia that even knew what stand-up paddling was, let alone took it serious enough to have a race board and travel somewhere and do a race. So remember there was a couple of early races in Norway, Sweden, Denmark where we kind of
we connected for those, yeah.
We'd be the sup nerds that took it really seriously.
For those of you that don't know, like Chris was actually a sup, like when you got into sup, you were actually serious about racing yourself.
Oh yeah.
Like we were going, like neck and neck in those first races.
I mean that's generous, but I wasn't too far behind you.
Well, you definitely pushed me, and like just this.
I claim credit for your entire career, basically.
Well, in a sense, look at it like this: it was a novelty in Denmark. I was paddling around, but like and a lot of people were just kind of like shrugging their shoulder, like, yeah, that's Casper, he's weird.
Yeah.
And then like I met another weird person, and just the fact that there was someone like at the same level, competitively, made it interesting. So like. There was Hamburg in Germany, the Jever Sup World Cup in 2009. That was my first event, which, meeting some of the, like going to that event and seeing the people down there really got me even more hooked. Like I was focused, like I just went there as a happy amateur trying to see what this competitive sport was all about because I'd just been paddling in waves at home. And all of a sudden I met guys like, Paul Jackson, Ernest Johnson, Ikulu Kalama, Eric Terrian, like the first real
OG
guys.
crew.
The original crew. And it was so inspiring to see, people that actually look at this as a sport and not just a pastime activity when there's no waves.
Yeah.
And that whole experience excited me. Like I did the amateur race in Hamburg. I had to freaking lie about my age.
Did you win? Or you got the podium or something that very first race?
So the deal was you had to, if you did well in the amateur competition, if you won, you could get a wild card to go against the pros. And like I did the amateur, and I was walking around. I didn't have a race board at the time, and I'm there with my dad, and my dad was loving it because Jever was sponsoring, like this beer company was sponsoring the race, and like he was having free beer. And basically, I looked around at Starboard was there, Nash was there, but I didn't know any of them. And I just talked to Starboard actually about like, hey, can I use one of those boards?
Wow, your career could have gone so different.
Well,
they missed out
Hamburg
on the Viking.
It was a defining moment. Like, they said I could use one of those Starboards for the race, and like I was just like getting ready for the race, and I looked away for 5 minutes, and the board I was supposed to use was given to someone else. Back to the 10-foot stock board, line up on the start line against the amateurs, and I've never done a race at this point, so I have no clue what the hell is happening. But then all of a sudden I see my dad on the side of the dock waving at me like, Casper, come over here, I got something. And he's waving this really big race board that has a big Quicksilver sticker on it, has a Red Bull sticker on it, and it says Nash. I don't really know what Nash is, but somehow my dad found it, and I ended up racing it, and I won the race. And I got back and like start talking to my dad, and I'm like, where did you steal that board? Where did that come from? And essentially it turns out that...
Was it a javelin?
It was
one of the first javelins.
The first generation of javelins.
Yeah,
and it was Robbie Nash's personal board.
Yeah?
Now, who is Robbie Nash? Like, I'm not a windsurfer, I'm not a kite surfer. I don't really know who he is. But my dad, you know, he has some common friends with him, and says, like, you should probably go thank the guy. And I go up, and like Robbie asks me, like I meet him and say, thank you, sir, for letting me use your board. Then he asks, like, did you scratch it? And I'm like, no, I'm so sorry. And that's how I met Robbie. And I didn't know who he was, but like from that moment, we remembered each other. He also remembered me because my car got towed the next day, and it was all over the loudspeaker in Germany at the event where, you know, someone was yelling like, there's a Danish car being towed right now, please present yourself. And Robbie said, is that your car? And my dad was like, no, that can't be ours. We parked a good place. Sure enough, our car disappeared.
Wow, so a borrowed board and a towed car, and that was just the start of your relationship with Nash.
Yeah.
Which has gone on
It's been going
10 years?
Since. We're probably at 10 years now, yeah.
Wow.
And Robbie was one of my first stand-up paddle sponsors, along with Jim at Quickblade.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating because Robbie was more than a sponsor. He was a mentor as well. Like, I quickly learned who he was as an athlete, and he's someone I very much respect, and like he's guided me a lot in terms of, you know, sponsor relations and like how do you actually make a living as an athlete.
Yeah.
Because it's not just your result that's going to drive money to your bank account. It's a story.
Yeah.
And I think Robbie made me understand that at least.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing you say about you need something more than you just your results.
What sets you apart from other people? What makes you marketable from a business perspective? And Robbie quickly like pointed out that you're from fucking Denmark. What is Denmark? And like in the surf world, like
I don't think many people can even find it on a map.
Denmark is this kind
Definitely
of
not Klitmøller.
Well, people talk about Denmark as this utopian place where, you know, people are the happiest in the world. But surf-wise, no way.
Yeah.
It's one of the worst countries in the world for surfing.
But I think the cool thing is, even though the waves like basically a pretty shit house here, you've got some of the happiest surfers in the world. So some of the most stoked surfers in the world. Like we were out in Klitmøller for the past week, your hometown, and I'd never seen so many people so excited about so little. Like the waves were terrible. It was freezing fucking cold. It was like we were in booties, gloves, hoodies. It was so cold. It's summer in a few weeks, and we were wearing just full suits. And honestly, the waves were, you know, half decent at best. It was fun, but it wasn't very good. Yet the vibe, everyone was so excited, which actually made the surf so much more fun. Like I had more fun surfing that than I would at home on the Gold Coast where there's 200 guys that just want to kill each other because there's too many guys in the water.
Yeah. I don't know why. I think it's just in Denmark we're so used to like the rough conditions don't scare us. We're used to having a climate that's not really pleasant most of the year.
You usually only have waves when it's just howling on shore.
Yeah.
And that's how you get the waves.
You know, you need storms to generate surf around here. And I think the community aspect is really strong. Like we have a young surf culture where you don't have all the negative sides yet of established surf cultures where, you know, people are, like you don't have the localism stuff, you don't have overcrowding yet. I mean, it's going that way, but you know, it's very cozy when you go surfing. And people are just happy. Like, you know, they go out, they don't know that it's, you know, it's not the best waves in the world, but they're still stoked. Yeah. And it's actually interesting because it translates when Danes go out into the world. Like we go to Morocco or we go to the California and surf, and like you're pleasantly surprised all the time. Like even though the locals like at Malibu will say like this is the worst surf ever, the Danes will be like, you're full of shit. This is better than Denmark still.
So if there's a happy blonde kid in the water, it's probably Danish.
There's a good chance. Yeah.
So you seem to enjoy a lot more what happens outside of competition. Yet you're known primarily in the SUP world as being a world champion, winning the ISA, winning a lot of big races around the world. Where do you see yourself going from here? This is something you and I have discussed a lot, but I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on this. Are you going to keep racing? Are you going to cut back a little bit? Where's your motivation?
My motivation...
Because Trevor had that theory about the 5-year burnout, right?
Oh, yeah.
You've lasted twice that long.
Well, I'm at 11. I've been
So you're well overdue.
I've been paddling for 11 years now. And I've been competing... 2009, so that... I'm on 11 years, yeah.
It seems like you're not burnt out, but you're almost losing motivation to race.
It's changing. Like, look, I've been paddling for 11 years. I'm really, really excited to have... I've won 4 world titles. I'm very, very proud of the work I've put in and like the countless hours of training. Like, I'm very proud of it. But my motivation is changing because I am, as a human, I'm changing. Like, I told you this theory I had of progression and learning as a human. Like, look at the moment we're born as small babies. Like, from the moment we're a baby, like, we start learning. We all of a sudden learn how to walk. We learn how to talk. We learn how to use our hands to create stuff. We learn to speak multiple languages. Some of us learn algebra, second degree equations, whatever. But basically, throughout when we learn new stuff, we get a sense of accomplishment and a sense of motivation from trying to do something. It's like I get a kick out of playing a guitar and learning a new chord. So to put that in the context of stand-up paddling for me, the past 11 years have been so fucking amazing. Like, I was learning so much about paddle techniques, board designs, race tactics. Like, there's all these parameters I could play with to improve, and I still can. I can just feel maybe I probably feel that I've hit a little bit of a plateau in terms of like learning new stuff. And that's where my motivation is partly changing. Like, I really love racing, but I really love other things as well. So the way I see it is very, like, my future outlook is very much based on the Viking crossing, because that event showed me that I can use paddling still to conquer all kinds of new experiences. Like, when I did the crossing, I had all these new questions that arose, like, how do I cross an ocean in the middle of the winter? How do I avoid getting seasick in the darkness? How do I deal with minus 20 degree temperatures while paddling? And, you know, all these things that it truly engaged me. And maybe with the state of stand-up paddling, which we've also spoken a lot about, like, just the plateau combined with that the sport is, you know, it's not, I feel it needs to be innovating a little bit more and changing.
It's getting a little boring.
I think it's time we spice things up a bit.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Maybe we could race from Denmark to Norway.
A race from Denmark to Norway?
Yeah, why not? You and Bart, Birdish.
That'd be fun. Like, get the big legends out. Like, those two guys, Bart de Zwart and Chris Birdish, were a big part of making the crossing a success, because I could use all the knowledge they had gathered over the years. But anyway, back to your question. Personally, yes, my motivation is changing. I'm not leaving stand-up paddling. I can feel if we start playing with tweaking race formats and doing what I think is interesting, I still got a long time left in paddling. I'm only 25.
Yeah.
Like, so there's no way physically I should be done yet. I just, like, maybe sometimes you need to take a walk, you know, metaphorically you need to take a walk and then come back maybe with a different perspective.
So how do we make SUP more interesting? Because I look at what you've done, and say if you looked at surfing, for example, the only thing that gets in the mass media, the mainstream media in surfing, is big wave surfing on a regular basis. Every time there's a record wave or a crazy swell, it'll be on like CNN, New York Times, The Guardian. Like, people are just fascinated by it. It transcends the boundaries, the limited boundaries of our own sport. And I look at what you guys do, like you, Bart, Birdish, that's kind of the big wave surfing of SUP. We got our racing, it's very niche, and it's probably always going to be relatively niche. Well, but if you can get a story that, like, transcends all the boundaries, like your Viking crossing, like Birdish going across the Atlantic is an extreme example, but that was the most media exposure SUP ever got, hands down.
Yeah.
Like, it went crazy.
Yeah.
So I think those things are actually far more valuable to our sport than a PPGs or a Carolina or something.
For what reason are they more valuable, you could ask? Like, what are we trying to achieve?
Well, I mean, that's a whole philosophical debate, but if we want more exposure for our sport to make it, you know, a sustainable career, whether you're an athlete or a brand or media or whatever, we need exposure. We need people to talk about our sport. And to achieve that, we need interesting stories,
Yeah.
I think. And I just think racing is a very hard story to tell. But crossing from one country to another, it's a very simple story, and then it can become a very deep story. So I think that can really touch people, and it can be, our big wave surfing. Like,
Well, it could be. It could be like, like you look, every sport has an extreme. Like I get a kick out of, I'm really into kite surfing right now. So let's just use that for an example. They're struggling as a sport as well because they have a pro tour where they do, like, take the freestyle for example. They're doing these amazing jumps and doing all these different spins and flips while they're jumping. But for the mainstream media and the mass population around the world, they don't get it. Like, it's cool to watch someone jump and like do that quickly, but what's really successful in kite surfing right now is the big air.
yeah.
Like where they see like how high can they actually go, 20, 30 meters in the air. Like it's kind of like the big wave surfing. Anyone can relate to it because there's a wow factor. Like you can relate to a big wave because you maybe have a fear of surf. Like you've had an experience as a kid maybe. And that just, it's easy to understand.
Yeah.
Like you can look at the competition formats we have in stand-up paddling and it can be difficult to follow, like for an outsider. Even for us inside the sport, it can be difficult. Like you have men there, women there. They're all kind of intertwined. But the real question is, what are we trying to achieve? And I think, no doubt, stand-up paddling it needs colorful characters that can project the story inside and outside the sub world. Chris Burdish, what he did with Crossing the Atlantic was amazing. What Kai Lenny does, he used stand-up paddling as a leap board onto what he's doing now in other sports. At least I still feel proud when I see Kai win the WSL Big Wave Awards the other day.
Yeah.
Because, wow, I was competing against him in stand-up paddling. And I think a lot of paddlers have that feeling with Kai.
Yeah.
But another thing we need to address in stand-up paddling is, in competition, we need to play with our formats.
Yeah.
To make it more interesting.
They've gotten so stale lately.
Are either interesting for the viewers or a reason to get even more people out there with us on the water.
Yeah, I think the beauty of stand-up paddling is that anyone can do it. I think that's actually the opening line of our manifesto. Anyway, the beauty of stand-up paddling is that anyone can do it. And I think we've got so many interesting parts of the sport. You can have the mass starts of the Gla race, which I think is such a cool thing to see and a cool thing to be part of, same with the Paris crossing. It just looks amazing. Yeah. But then you've got you've got everything from the downwinders, which is, the very romantic vision of the sport. You got the surf racing, which is kind of, like our little destruction derbies. Yeah. But none of it's really changed since maybe 2009, 2008. Like, there's been a little bit. We had, Jacko did his super lap, Jamie did his Survivor. We're doing the 200 meter sprints, but then that's like a borrowed format. There hasn't been a lot of innovation.
Basically, we're doing the same, pretty much, as since Battle of the Paddle introduced technical racing and a long distance. And like they're fun formats, but I can definitely see that maybe that's why I personally am losing motivation. Is like, well, I feel I've done this before, and like, but what's the next challenge? And it's not just stand-up paddling. Other sports are constantly evolving as well. Partly because there's competition for viewership on TV, or why would a sponsor continually keep pouring money into a sport? Yeah. If people are kind of losing interest. Like, was it you were saying, like in Australia, you have the example right now with the Ironman racing.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. That's fascinating because they're using SUP to innovate themselves.
And though that's the surf life saving.
The surf life saving, like lifeguard racing, Ironman we call it in Australia. Basically, you used to swim, do a little beach run, go on the surf ski, go on the prone paddleboard, and it was a national sport. Like in the 90s, we'd watch them every week on TV. Actually, some of the paddlers now, Carla Gilbert and those type, were superstars in Australia. And over the last 10 years, that sport's still been around, but it's really been on the wane. They weren't going to have it on TV anymore. And then one guy came in and said, look, if we're going to save this sport as a TV spectacle, we've got to make it innovative. So one of the innovations, which looks like it might be coming in next summer, is stand-up paddling will now be a leg of the traditional relay between the prone, the surf ski, the swimming. And they're going to bring in this whole like Tough Mudder, Ninja Warrior style beach course where they got to go to these obstacles. Like Chuck tried years ago. Chuck Patterson did it in California at the Army base near San Diego, and I thought that was actually, I did that race. That was one of the funnest races I've ever done.
And that's where like it was not just paddling as fast as you could. It was also you had to go through this like obstacle course.
It was fucked. It was so hard. It was like a 10-minute race, and I was dead by the end of each course. Like I remember just paddling alongside Sean Pointer, and he just gave me that look, and it was half between like I am dying, but it's so much fun. Because we'd go on this obstacle course like over and under ropes and everything, and these weird tire things, and we'd get onto our board, paddle out. There was one of those inflatable slidey castles in the middle. We'd jump off our board. We had chaperones that put it around the other side. We'd clamber up, slide down into the ocean, like jump back on the board, keep paddling. It was so different, but it was so fun, and I can't figure out why we haven't tried more things like this. Like it was really ahead of its time, that race.
Why do you think? Because like you're sitting here talking to me, but I'm kind of curious to hear from you. Why have we not tried more? Why have we not experimented more with formats? Like, why have we already become locked?
I think this we could talk hours about this. I think there's a few reasons. One is the BOP was so popular, it basically drowned out the rest of the sport. Like, it was the only race every year in terms of, it was called the Super Bowl. It was the only race where everyone was going there, so everyone looked to it because it was this singular focus in the sport. And that spawned so many copycats around the world. Mm-hmm. So many event organizers were like, well, the BOP is the gold standard. We'll just do whatever they're doing. And the BOP, actually, like, for all it's done for our sport, wasn't that good of an event. Like, it wasn't the best organized event. It definitely wasn't the most innovative. Like, they tried a webcast and they got rid of it because it was expensive. They couldn't be bothered. It did amazing things for our sport that we should be grateful for, but it didn't innovate. And considering it was the leader, I think that ended up becoming an issue. Mm-hmm. And then the other issue was, okay, if the BOP's not going to lead, who's going to lead? Like, we had such a vacuum of leadership, and many would argue we still do have a vacuum of leadership in our sport. It's like, okay, who's setting the standard? Is it the ISA? But then you look at the ISA and they're kind of more reactionary. They'll follow what the rest of the sport's doing rather than setting new formats or whatever. I mean, the World Series, APP, they've tried some new things, but it hasn't really worked. And they've basically now gone back to that traditional thing. They just do sprints in a distance. So basically, we haven't gotten anywhere. And I think it's one, because of the BOP, and two, because there's just a lack of leadership in our sport, which is, we could get into a whole nother discussion. I don't even want to waste time talking about the paddle ticks.
Trevor, do you have any water?
Yeah.
But I think regardless of why, doesn't even matter anymore. We've just got to say, look, it's been so long, we have to innovate. And I look at different sports and how they, one, do their formats, and two, cover the races. Because it's not, you can take a boring race, like 11 cities is probably the most boring race in the world, just because of its length and the fact not much happens. But to me, that could be the single most exciting race to watch. Like, that's our Tour de France. Mm-hmm. Tour de France is like third or fourth most watched TV spectacle in the sporting world. And it's a bunch of guys on the flat, nothing really happens 99% of the race. Every now and then they go up a hill and there's some cool action moments.
Tour de France is
but it's fascinating.
It's interesting because then, like, of course, you have the race inside it, but then you have, I don't know what the Australian version is like, but in Denmark we hired this really eccentric old guy in Jørgen Let, that like he knows everything about, like, oh, you see that chateau up there, that there's a story there, like some prince was killed or whatever. There's all this gossip and background story that's interesting. Remember, I'm constantly thinking of how could we spice things up? How could we make it more interesting for viewers on webcasts? And I think one thing is playing with the concept as well, but okay, we did the Wings for Life World Run the other day.
Yeah, you did it. I just hung on for about an hour.
And the Wings for Life, that event, it's an event hosted by Red Bull all around the world. And it's basically you're running to raise awareness for spinal cord research. But the format is so brilliant, I feel, where
it's incredible.
You have 150,000 people all around the world. Like, some are running at actual event sites where there's a course set up. Others are running with the app on their phone. And we all start at the same time. 1 o'clock Central European time. And then we run, but there's no final goal. There's no finish line we're chasing. We're being chased.
Yeah.
By a finish line. Because 30 minutes after we started, a catcher car would start driving and would eventually start catching us one by one.
Caught me pretty early, but no, I think that's a fascinating concept. They've taken what should be the most boring thing in the world, a fun run, and made it actually not just exciting to do, because I did it and I didn't even run. Like, it was fun to do it. But it was cool to watch. Like, we finished, and because the winners go for 4 hours, we finished after a couple of hours. We went back to your place and actually watched the second half of the live stream. And it was incredible the way they produced it. They had a 30 cam split screen for starters. Like, the budget was unreal. But the way they showed that, okay, it started with 150,000 people and they had this countdown. It's like, all right, there's only 10,000 people left. There's only 1,000 people left. There's only 50 people left. 49, 48. People were getting picked off one by one. It was like this cheetah was chasing the ancient cavemen, and he was just like taking us down one by one.
I wonder what, you probably made like top 100,000.
I'm hoping for top 80,000 next year. You know, I'm going to work on my training. But no, it's fun. I went running with you around Klitmuller, and after a while, I just kind of hit the wall there. But it's like good training.
It was fun to watch. Like, it really, like, I was captivated for the next 2 hours when I got back and we watched the whole thing.
And why is it? Because it is a very boring thing if you explain it to someone, but...
Just like stand-up paddling, like, we're not Formula One racing. Like, it's not that we're going, always doing super spectacular stuff, but like you know, when you watch a race and like Michael Booth and Tituan and the guys are pushing each other, like, there's so much happening, but like visually you're not gonna necessarily see it, but it's tactics, it's timing, it's like saving energy for the right moment. And if you can make stand-up paddling super exciting. And I think what we need is we need an open discussion. We need to just actually be talking more about this.
Yeah.
And not being afraid to walk away from what exists. Like, look, we're a sport, we're only, some would argue, 15, 20 years old, not even 20 years old as a sport. But we
got time to get this right.
We've become very locked in our ways of thinking, I feel.
Yeah.
And like that's why I get a kick out of anyone that actually wants to discuss this.
Yeah.
But
let's come up with a brand new format. We're going to save the sport here in Copenhagen. What if we were talking about this the other night when I had a bit too much wine to drink, but what if we get 400 amateurs on the start line, and then there's like Michael Booth starting a couple of minutes behind.
Oh, that one. I thought you were talking about my last man standing concept.
Oh, the last man standing, that's an even better one. Okay. But I love this thing where you're basically trying to outrun something because it's so primitive. Yeah. It's like that caveman mentality of outrunning the cheetah.
Yeah. So yeah, the serious one we were talking about was actually really fun, because imagine you had some really fast paddler, Michael Booth, for example, or the winner of like the champion of the year, like at the first event next year, will be chasing everyone. Where you have a bunch of amateurs that sign up and they get like maybe based on you can make a handicap system, like no matter, like you get either a 1 minute or a 2 minute or a 5 minute head start. Let's just say on Michael Booth.
Yeah.
And you're basically fighting on a set distance, like, I don't know, 5 kilometers, 6 kilometers, 10 kilometers. You're trying to keep him back there, but he's going to be reeling you in pretty much. And that'd be a fun concept. And it's like, can you keep him off? That's the question that all of a sudden becomes the whole drive of the race.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Do that somewhere like the Glagla. I reckon that'd be such a cool thing. And then I remember actually a Red Bull event, we were talking about, there was these 6-man sculls, like the rowing super narrow rowboats. And they're in the tidal bore, I think it's the Severn River in England. And basically they started like a few minutes before the tidal bore and they just had to outrun the tidal bore. And as soon as the tidal bore caught them, they were out. And usually quite literally, because when the tidal bore came washing over, it'd fill up the boat and they'd start sinking.
Yeah.
But it was amazing to see. And I think that would be such an easy concept in stand-up paddling. So I think we've got two things. One is the format, which we've got to innovate on. Everyone agrees on that, I think. Two is the coverage. And that's something, very dear to my heart, because probably no one's done more live streams than me, both good and bad. But I think if we can tell more interesting stories, and within that, there's two parts. There's one, you've got to know what you're talking about, which I think is one of my specialties. But two, you got to have a big budget, like a Red Bull budget, or close to it, and so you can show all the different camera angles and have statistics that help tell the story. Yeah. Which it's not that crazy with modern technology, but no one's really got that dialed yet.
No. But a lot can be done even without a big budget. Like, a lot of it comes down to what storytelling opportunity do you have in the race? And like Glagla, for example, it's it's radical. You're paddling in the middle of winter on a lake with mountains around you. Like that creates something in itself. But like the way I see it is we can do stuff relatively easy. We don't have to always reinvent not the wheel, but like it doesn't always have to be big and perfect. We just need to start trying stuff. Like when Jacko tried the Superlap format, we gave it a shot and we learned that it has some good qualities. Also, it was fucking hard to understand for a lot of people.
That's one format where I think if we had better technology, it would be so cool.
But also
because it was hard to follow, but it's such an exciting.
And another thing we maybe should be considering is stand-up paddling. We've been calling it the fastest growing sport in the world for many years. And it's funny, like we're still...
Has anyone ever verified that fact?
Where did it come from? I saw a quote in Men's Health like 2013 or something. But where they got it from, I don't know.
It was one of those...
It was widely considered that was just the state of stand-up paddling. There's new faces showing up all the time. There's boards being sold. Like it was exponentially growing. And it just like now we're facing other problems. But the sport is still huge. But not necessarily in the amount... It's not
what is the sport?
It's not shown in the amount of people that show up at a race necessarily. Because I think that like maybe it's 99% of people that have actually tried paddling.
Yeah.
Like actually stood on a board, held a paddle, paddled across the water. How many of every single human around the world that has done that, how many of them have ever participated in a race?
Yeah, so 0.1%.
I don't know. There's no data, there's no statistic, but it's interesting, and it can't be many.
It's a tiny percentage.
Yeah. So it's interesting, like you have this mass that enjoys it as recreational activity. Maybe the question should be is how do we actually involve these people in an organized form of competition or challenge or whatever it is?
Well, I think the simplest way is just take what they're doing and make it an organized event. Like, look at running, for example. So many people go out jogging in the morning. And then you go and do a fun run for 5Ks or 10Ks, you're doing the exact same thing. You just go and run for 5Ks.
Yeah, but why would you want to do that?
Because you feel like you're part of something bigger, I think. There is that element of competition where you want to beat your personal time and it's all official and you want to beat your best mate. But I feel like it's because you're part of something. You stay on the start line with 5,000 other people. It's an amazing feeling.
And that's true. That's absolutely true. Like there's something about being part of a bigger group. But there's also something very alienating about that at the same time. Like when I ask like my mom or something, like, why don't you come to these would you want to come and be part of these big races? And she just doesn't, she loves paddling, but she does not feel she belongs. Whereas, for example, like Paris, like I brought her to the Paris race 2 years ago, and we got, our plane was delayed, and we got in 3 a.m., 3 hours of sleep, and right to the start line. But she was all excited about being part of, like doing something special. And she wasn't there to win.
Yeah.
She was there just to paddle next to the Eiffel Tower and, meet some new people as well. And I think, my point being, I think by having too much of an elite focus, we're alienating people.
Oh, 100%.
And the elite has its place. Like we elite athletes, like we want to make a living from this, but sometimes it's we got to step out of the spotlight, and stories should be focused on the average Joes, like the people just having a day job and paddling and in their free time going on these cool adventures. Like, well, I get a kick out of like some of the Danish guys that they went to the Glagla race and they went to Paris, and like now they're talking, which one are we gonna do next?
Yeah, I think the focus on the elite racing has really strangled our sport in the past. There's been many factors, but I don't think that's helped because it's definitely alienated people. And we go around, we're on Mallorca, that Spanish island, a couple of weeks ago, and we're talking with them about, why is the sport plateauing or growing or declining or whatever you think it's doing. And they said, back in the old days, we felt like they're amateurs, right? And they said, back in the old days, we felt like we were part of it. And now we don't feel like we're part of it anymore. We go to a race, the elite race is separate, maybe it's like 4 hours later, the pros don't even show up when the open race is on or whatever. It just feels like there's this massive disconnect.
Yeah.
And like we wrote about it in the Paddle League Manifesto, which was kind of our way of resetting what the Paddle League is and what it stands for and what the hell it's actually going to do this year and beyond, because a few people were asking. And the whole ethos of it was, this is an open sport and we've got to promote it in an open way. And while you need that elite 1% because you want a sport to be aspirational, you can't lose that disconnect. And I think that gets back to my point I was trying to make, is if you want those 99.9% of people that don't race but do paddle, they just go out on a Sunday on their inflatables, how do you get them into a race? Just offer them something that is what they're already doing. Like make it a really simple flat water 5K paddle.
Yeah, you can't.
So many races are intimidating.
Yeah.
So I think if you've got something that's very open and accessible, I mean, if you build it, they're going to come. It's just that we've had this focus on making racing an elite thing, and a lot of people will say, oh, that's not, I can't race.
Yeah.
So it's just really how we've marketed it.
No, it could definitely change. But, I guess that's, on that note, like, for me, look, we've had this discussion before. What can we do to change the course of the sport? And I think for me, one thing that became very clear that I could do was, well, let's try to do. I'm hosting an event this summer called the Midsummer Viking Challenge, which was very much inspired by the crossing to Norway, where I realized, like, look, I tried to do something that many people considered impossible, something that I was doubting whether I could even do. I only completed it because I had a very strong team around me. So I figured, like, how can I take those values and those elements and how to merge it into an event for more people. So my friend Ole and the Danish team of paddlers came up with a concept where we're doing like a Le Mans style event in Copenhagen in June, where you're paddling teams of 5 and you're paddling for 24 hours. So you'll alternate, and it's a relay. So we're gonna be paddling this 5-kilometer course around this island, starting in the middle of the day. And every time you do a lap, you will come in, high five your teammate, send the next person out. And what's interesting about it is it's not a race. Some people might want to see who can paddle most laps, but the purpose being to get average paddlers out and do something that pushes their limits, something that they can feel engaged in without being alienated at the same time.
Yeah.
Like my mom. Like I'll ask, hey mom, you think you can paddle for 24 hours straight? No fucking way. But all of a sudden, when her girlfriends kind of got into it, like they're kind of talking and like, yeah, maybe we can do it, but we'll have a party doing it.
Yeah.
Like that was for me really rewarding to see that, like, we haven't done it yet, but just the way they're talking about it, like now they're excited.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool format you guys are doing. And I think it speaks to something we're missing in our sport, which is the team atmosphere. Because this is such an individualistic sport. And outside of the ISA, where there's, it's a national team, but even then, except for the relay, it's just still an individual race.
Oh, you're counting points, but like here, you're physically, you're working together.
Yeah.
Like you're in the same format, so to say.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. I'm excited to see how you guys do with that. And like I look at what Red Paddle Co does with their dragon boards, where it's 4 people. That's one of the funnest races I've ever seen. Like people just absolutely love that format. Yeah. And it's so different, and it actually gets a lot of people into racing that probably wouldn't race otherwise. Yeah. So I think those kind of things are a cross between novelty and actually, you gotta have a balance between the novelty and the simplicity and actually making an athletic thing. Yeah. And like the pinnacle of our sport can't be a 5K flat
and having race. A freaking cool setup around like music and food and
how many races?
Like, look, like what do humans like? We like to be fed. We like to have social interactions with people. We like dancing.
Some of us really like dancing.
Does, at least.
Also like to be fed.
There's a bar in my bag, Trev.
Guys, I really got to take a piss.
All right, you take a...
We have a little break.
I'm just going to do a little story time with Sup Racer.
Okay.
So basically what we've been talking about with Casper so far is everything from his movie premiere, which is absolutely fascinating. If you get a chance, watch the Skagerrak film. It's... to me, it was like a really moving piece of imagery, just that whole story he went through, not just physical challenge, but the mental challenge. Ended up becoming a big story as Trevor gets some lunch. But I think some of the things Casper's mentioned about this sport is stale a little bit, and we do need to innovate. That's something that we all need to be talking about, not just me and Casper here, or whether it's the ISA or whoever. I think everybody needs to be contributing to that, because you could be like a weekend warrior out there and you might have the coolest race format ever that's going to change the whole trajectory of our sport. So I think the beauty of stand-up paddling is, to finish off this little soliloquy monologue, is that we are a very inclusive community. And we've lost a little bit of that, but hopefully we can bring that back. And it goes both ways. It's like the people that have influence in the sport need to do more to make it more inclusive, but the people who want to be included, you got to stand up and have your say and raise your voice, because I think the future of this sport is very bright, but we're all part of it.
Yeah.
So as soon as Casper gets back, I want to chat about a few more things. He's got to run soon because there's an actual movie premiere in about 2 or 3 hours, and
We're going.
I think we're going,
That's
and
it, movies.
Casper's got to go, press his suit and iron his shirt. So we're gonna have to wrap this up soon, but we are very grateful that he's given us his time twice now. We had this full 2.5-hour podcast a couple of days ago in Klipmuller, and for a couple of different reasons, it didn't quite work out technically. We lost light, we lost sobriety, we lost a few things there, so but that was a good discussion. But as the Viking, all right, as the Viking gets back in here. So Casper, I was just telling you, just giving you a little recap of what we've been chatting about here, and I must say we're in a very interesting setting here in your friend's apartment in Copenhagen. I just tilt this back. It's been suspiciously tilted down the whole time, but this is just a beautiful French girl.
Yeah,
There. That's just a lovely. I think she's having some red wine, which I wouldn't mind having right now.
It definitely has her hand out, drinking wine. It's a great setting.
No, I like this apartment. It's very cool.
One thing that, are we recording right now?
Yeah, we're still going.
We're on. So one of the stories behind sitting here is, obviously we did a podcast the other day. We had some technical issues, but what I want to mention is Chris and Trevor. They have to leave to Ukraine, but they decided to chase me down. Got on a train early this morning to hunt me down before the premiere tonight, so we could get this podcast.
I was really committed to making you the first guest on Paddlecast because I know you've got some fascinating stories. And while we're here, I really wanted to take advantage of that. And I was so excited the other day when we did that big podcast, and then just a little heartbroken when I saw A, what happened with the audio, B, the light just disappeared and we're sitting in the dark, C, I probably drank way too much wine. Towards the end I might have been slurring my speech a little, so we thought we're going to hop on the train. We've actually sat on the train for 6 hours this morning. I slept for about 2 hours last night. Fortunately caught up on a little bit of sleep on the train, but here we are on Monday afternoon.
It's Tuesday.
It's Tuesday?
Yeah.
Holy shit. Okay, Tuesday afternoon in Copenhagen. We're supposed to be at the Ukrainian embassy to get a visa before we actually got to go do that. Because there's a race in Kiev this weekend, which kind of circles back nicely to about the whole thing of, what do you want to focus on in the sport? And one of the things I want to focus on this year is what I call like the new frontiers, which is just sup in places it's just not traditionally ever been. And I mean, Ukraine, that's pretty far off the beaten track of stand-up paddling and surfing
It's
culture.
definitely not the place you hear of that often.
No.
In the way the media works right now.
But that's a very cool city, and there's some really passionate paddlers there. So we're hopefully, fingers crossed, we're going to get a visa. And we're going to be there this weekend for the Kiev Open, which will be exciting. I'm even going to get on the race board and have a crack at it. But I know you got to iron your shirt, so we're going to just have a few more things I wanted to chat about, firstly. One is...
Well, I got to learn how to iron a shirt.
That's
one of the skills I don't
I'm sure Trevor can help you
I'll
out
learn
there.
the other day, actually.
Trevor's learned a lot of things this week, but
Some hard lessons.
but one thing I know that people are going to ask if I don't ask about it is, can you tell us where the ISA is going next?
The ISA Worlds, I really wish I could tell exactly the location and the time it'll happen. I just can't right now because it's not finalized yet. It's
happening this year though?
Ideally, yes, but there's nothing confirmed at this point, and that the team at the ISA is working to try to secure a host.
Yeah.
But between fighting and preparing the court case with the ICF at CAS and dealing with other Olympic matters for surfing.
They're debuting surfing in like 12 months.
In 12 months in Tokyo.
They're a little busy.
There's a lot of stuff happening, and personally, it's super frustrating that we don't have a place to announce yet for the Worlds. I really hope it's going to happen this year. It's just it just shows some of the issues we have organizationally in the sport right now, and like the ISA is doing everything it can, and like I understand there's a lot of frustration out there. I wish there was something I can do, but I don't have. Can't magically just snap my fingers.
Why do you think there is that frustration? Because I'm going to give you my theory first. I think the ISA does an extraordinary job with their limited resources and the fact that organising sub races is a freaking hard thing to do. Yet we don't really. I think the frustration lies in that we just don't hear from them very often. Like it's this. It feels like if we talk about the disconnect between elite and amateurs, I feel like there's this massive disconnect between the so-called powers that be, whether it's the ICF, ISA, whoever, and the core community, and that's where I think the frustration lies.
Well, okay, so you got to take a step back again here, because you look at our sport. Where did we come from? We came as a very stand-up paddling originated as like just a trend. Like some people started paddling, and all of a sudden it was a very commercial reality. Like who brought the sport to where we are right now? Who paid the top athletes?
Who paid Sup Racer?
Uncle Sven.
Uncle Sven from Starboard. It was the industry.
The board manufacturers and the equipment manufacturers. Like that was where stand-up paddling became this commercial entity where it was growing really fast, and there were a lot of boards being sold, and the industry also supported events. We're very new. How to say it? Like stand-up paddling is still a very new and young activity, and we did not come up through the traditional ranks of other sports. Like look at FIFA, and like FIFA has its own problems, but like look at any other.
Yeah, we probably shouldn't be trying to emulate FIFA,
but look at all the other sports that have a super long track record. A lot of international federations are celebrating, I don't know, 50, 80, 100-year anniversaries now.
Yeah.
Like stand-up paddling as an actual sport with a competition format, 12 years?
How many years have we been around? D-Day, if day 0 was the 2008 Battle of Paddle, so we're not even 11 years old.
Right. So look at it like this. We are a commercial sport that all of a sudden now it's trying to fit into a traditional model of federations, and it's complicated because that is not.
Are we ready to fit into that?
Well, look at it, we're
still so young.
We're kind of coming from a different approach, and there is no model for it. Just like skateboarding is suffering right now, because skateboarding is not. It's not a federation. It's not a club-based sport. Even it's very individual.
That's a lifestyle. That's an interesting one to go into the Olympics. I think
it's fascinating to look at.
It's almost the antithesis of the Olympics. The culture. It's like such a rebellious culture. And now they're part of the establishment at the very top level.
And there's a lot of issues there. But basically, in terms of stand-up paddling, it's morphing into this federation-based model in international federations, national federations, clubs. In some places, this transition is very harmonic. Take Denmark, for example. We have a very great Danish federation that.
Yeah, you guys seem to have it together.
We've tried. I think the trick.
Except for the fact you're getting screwed over by the Danish Canoe Federation.
Yeah,
that's a minor detail.
You
lost your government funding, right?
We lost government funding because of the ICF ISA conflict.
So this is a personal fight for you. You're invested on so many levels. You're an athlete.
I'm vested.
You're an ISA vice president, and you're part of the Danish Federation, who's probably been hit harder than any country.
There's a lot of stuff, and I see the opportunity it's cost other athletes. Like we were in the Youth Olympic Games in Buenos Aires.
Yeah.
Then we were kicked out because of this conflict. And I think, as a vice president at the ISA, which I was elected 5 years ago, the reason I was elected was because I felt that everything was moving forward, and I had a chance to influence and bridge communication. And I believe in a federation-based model. I believe that what I've done here in Denmark by also being vice president in the Danish Federation, it's actually brought the community together. And
Man.
And I see what it's done for young athletes as well. It's given a structure and something to follow. Because the danger of a only commercial-based system, which the brands represented for many years, what happens when they don't sell boards anymore?
Yeah, that's happening right now.
And all of a sudden, the top athletes, start getting cut and people disappear. So that's my motivation to get into a federation-based model. but that has its issues as well, obviously. And
why do you think there's so much politics in this little sport? I often wonder, are all sports as messed up as us? Are we special, or is this just human nature?
I think every sport has politics in one way or another.
I'm sure they have them, but I feel like we've got crippling politics.
Paddlecast, it's one above.
We got paddletics is next level politics.
We have identity issues.
Yeah.
Because we have identity issues in the terms of who are we? And like, it's not just are we surfing or are we canoeing? No. How do we structure ourselves? Like, it's not like there's been this model that's the correct one for the last 50 years.
Yeah.
Like, it's very new. So
I think that was one of the big issues.
Also the fact that you look at a young kid coming out of high school, what should I go study? It's kind of the same situation we're in. Like in terms of there's a lot of ways we as a sport can go. There's no.
What's the solution?
I mean, like,
if you were elevated from vice president to president of the ISA, what would be your first order? You're sitting behind that the desk in the Oval Office there.
I would look.
You're wearing a nice bow tie, pink bow tie.
Look at
Fernando
that.
left behind for you. What would be, but seriously, what would be one major structural thing that you'd like to see? It doesn't have to be anything to do with ISA, ICF, anything at all. Just the sport in general. What's one thing you think we need to change?
Well, as we talked about earlier, I would passionately work on formats, like competition formats. I would also very much focus on juniors, like working on a structure for actually developing talent. Because as of right now, Trevor, myself, pretty much everyone that's come into stand-up paddling as an elite athlete, we came in because we were kind of solo athletes, or like we discovered we had talent by ourselves, but like there was never any real structure for it. Maybe a brand would start paying some of our tickets and stuff. But that's changing. And that, like, I don't want to be president. I don't want to be a politician. I would rather be on the water. So that's, first of all, that's my motivation here. And
so you're not going to be president?
I have no intention of...
Didn't you just announce you're running for president of Denmark?
Not yet.
Prime Minister?
It's
Oh,
happening.
okay. Whoa, scoop.
That's happening later.
Sup race exclusive.
Yeah. I'll give it to you now. There's the next election for the Danish Parliament was just announced an hour ago, and I'm going to do a little sketch on I'm running for president.
All right.
But no, honestly, like
I'll vote for you, Viking.
Same, you got mine.
Politics aside, like I enjoy being on the water, and that's also when I got into working with the ISA as a vice president. It was because I felt that I saw some things that need to be changed. And like I can see right now, there is still a lot of work to be done in terms of securing juniors and like the next generation's path to the top of the sport. Because a clear example right now, when I got into the sport and like did my first race at age 15, the gap between me and Ikulu Kalama and Eric Terrien that were at the top, it was not that big. But that gap has widened now. Like a 16-year-old kid, like an average kid, like there are some freaks out there. But like to go up against Michael Booth when you're only 16 or 18, that's hectic.
Man,
like most kids don't like.
He could crush a 16-year-old.
Not every kid.
His biceps.
Not every kid.
Like guy in Game of Thrones.
Remember Slater Trout? Not everyone is a man-child like Slater Trout when they're 15. Yeah. So that's why, like in a lot of other sports, you have these
13 even. That kid was a freak.
You have these under 18, under 20, under 21 categories.
Yeah.
And we need to do more of that. We need to create some kind of stepping stone in the sport, and doing the juniors in conjunction with ISA Worlds last year in China, it was a first step.
Yeah, I think that was massive inclusion, and it was a really positive step forward for the ISA. As much as I like to give them shit, they do a lot of good things. And one thing with the Paddle League and the World Rankings that I started a long time ago was that it was always just this elite focus. And so we talk about this disconnect, and I think I've been as much a part of that as anyone. But one of the things I want to do this year, which is going to be a logistical nightmare for me and my spreadsheets, is create a junior world rankings. Because I think it's just really cool to see, give them their own chance to shine the spotlight. We're going to do the same with the masters and kind of try and follow that triathlon model where there's the age groupers. But on the junior side, I'm curious, what is a junior? Because you look at different sports, there's everything from like under 15s to under 23 is considered junior. And then you go like, okay, well, like who's, where would it be in SUP? Like freaking Slater Trout was runner up at the BOP at 13 years of age. Do we make it under 12s? Like now there's guys that are probably
Well-
19, 20 in developing countries, like sub-developing countries, that are still considered on the junior pathway.
Yeah,
They haven't
yeah.
had that chance yet. So where do we draw the line? Like, give me an age.
I'm not going to give you an age.
If it goes wrong,
I'm
I'll
not
blame
going to give you an age because it depends on what type of format you're doing. Like,
Well, it's
there's
just
a very different.
it's a pure world rankings. It's going to be based on kids in those. They're not going to, like, I'm not going around organizing junior races. It's just, okay, if you did the Glagla race and you're 14 years old, the points you get from that should go and put you on a separate leaderboard as well as being part of the main ones.
Yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be really cool. But I'd say, like,
So in that term,
we've been working with the term, like, if you had to just do one junior category, like 18 and under seems like the obvious one to go for.
yeah.
But like then you look at other endurance-based sports like cycling, for example. You have an U21.
They've even got an under 23, I think.
U23 even.
Yeah.
Remember my friend Simon was telling me about that. He's a cyclist, and it's interesting. But it also, like, for such endurance-based sports, you're not going to peak until you're older as well.
Well, that's different because marathon runners peak when they're like 35, 40 or something
Yeah,
insane
but
like
cycling is an
that.
endurance-based
Cycling's
sport.
pretty similar.
Similar, yeah.
So 22, you are still junior.
Yeah, but you got to look at when do the young athletes actually start mixing it up with the top elites, the top open elites, like.
But that's a problem.
And-
Like,
and
I feel
then-
like that's like this whole chicken and the egg argument because like we were in Tahiti and there's a 15-year-old kid that was going toe-to-toe with
Keone,
Tituan,
right?
Keone Solpus.
Yeah.
Yet there was plenty of 25-year-olds that had no chance against Tituan. So like where do you say, okay, there's a super freak 15-year-old, do we make the juniors under 15 so that he's got to compete with the
Yeah, I don't know.
adults? But then you penalize the kids that are 17, 18 and still maturing. So basically there's no answer, is there?
There's no correct answer, but like there's.
I'm going to get yelled at either way, no matter
Talk to.
what I choose.
You know, I think you should call up Bryce. Bryce in the UK. Our friend
Bryce Dyer, yeah.
Dyer, yeah, he would.
Dr. Bryce Dyer, I believe.
You know, because you need to consult with people from other sports about that. And
Yeah, I need a good scapegoat. So
So you don't make the
Bryce,
decision.
make a note, producer. We call him Bryce tonight. No, I think that's actually really good advice. Is just you've got to consult and look at different sports. I remember there's a fascinating thing when I was talking with him a lot, and Jim Terrell and a lot of people when there was the whole. Remember the board class debate? Mm-hmm. That insane debate about like a foot and a half of foam, how long that took to resolve. I swear that's like a symbol of our sport. But it was interesting to look at how other sports were doing, you know, restrictions on equipment. And there was that whole fascinating debate about what was happening in canoeing, what was happening in cycling.
True, yeah. That was
And
big.
I think it is, even though we are an 11-year-old sport and we're just still we're not even a teenager yet. Like we're just a little kid. But there are other sports that have a lot of parallels. Like we can look at what went right and wrong in canoeing, whether or not you give a shit about the ICF, and a lot of us don't. But they're a similar sport that we can learn from in terms of why they had a rise and fall. Same with windsurfing,
Yeah.
snowboarding, why those rise and falls,
No, you need to
what
look.
could be changed. But also I think it's fascinating to look at other sports like this, just to finish off with the formats. Look at something we're really similar to. Like I'd say the two most similar sports, it might sound a little weird, but two most similar sports to me is cycling and cross-country skiing.
Yeah.
Because of the variety of different formats and, you know, generally, especially cross-country skiing, the pacing is very similar, relatively slow, but they've figured out how to make it a sport worth watching.
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge sport in the Nordic countries.
And that has the help of having thousands of years of history. You know, that was literally how you got around back in the old days.
Yeah.
But still, they've made it a modern, one of the most popular sports in the Winter Olympics is biathlon now.
That's the one where you shoot, right?
You get if you come from Australia or America like me, Australia, not America. It's the most bizarre sport. You go around like this is bullshit.
Yeah.
You got a gun and a ski. That's like the alpine snipers are in this sport. It's like you're swimming along, and then at the end of the lane, there's like a guy you got to strangle, and then you get back in and you do another lap, and they got like a whip or something.
Yeah.
It made no sense. But then I moved to Sweden, and I was like, oh my god, this is the greatest sport in the world. And it actually had a lot of
No,
sense
they
to
make it interesting. And like that's.
And there was a logical story to how this came about. Like it actually made sense because you know that's how you used to get around when you're hunting. Even there's famous Norwegian soldiers that were doing this. It's got its history. So once you can understand that and enjoy the spectacle, it's actually a fascinating sport.
Mm-hmm.
So
I love cross country skiing. Like
so what's our biathlon?
Well, maybe that's the question. Jim Terrell had an idea that it should be shooting hoops with a basketball.
Dave Kleiman was really excited about that.
Yeah, Dave was
He's going to make his comeback.
loving it. I'd say, I like if you look at a trend that's really popular right now as a sport in society, obstacle course racing is an obvious choice.
Yeah.
Like say we already have the beach run, which we've played with in the sport, like between laps in a technical race. But why not add some courses, like some ditches you have to go through, like some stuff you have to climb over.
The Chuck Patterson race.
Like basically,
Chuck was ahead of his time, man.
Maybe Chuck was a visionary that just
get him off that foil, get him back into a sup, and
no. But I was
race.
so bummed. I was so bummed because I remember Chuck put on that race, and I really wanted to do it, but because I was so focused on BOP, the week after I think it was, or I was doing something else, like it didn't have enough value for me because I was focused on winning somewhere else.
Yeah, I think it was right before BOP or Huntington.
But that's like a whole general thing in life that sometimes we get so focused on stuff that we actually limit ourselves from seeing or trying something really cool around us.
So you're saying you're making a comeback for the 11 cities this year?
I'd love to.
That was a race that you kind of started, that was one of your stepping stones, that race.
Yeah, I remember the first year I did it in 2000.
And you've got unfinished business there, man.
Got third the first time, second next time. So essentially, the next time I do it, I should win. But again, like that's an opportunity cost because if you train, and I ask the Hasulio brothers, if you train, or Bart, if you train for 11 cities, you're basically setting yourself up to be really good in that specific environment of performing for 4, 5, 6 hours every day. But to do any other type of racing, you're gonna, like afterwards at least,
you're gonna struggle for the next 6 weeks.
You're gonna be messed up. I felt like a zombie for the next 3 weeks.
Yeah. And
then it's not practical that after 11 cities we had Battle of the Paddle or Pacific Paddle Games.
Well, that's not happening anymore, so...
So I guess I do have...
Now you got a little bit of free time? Actually, no, I think New York's after that.
I was kind of thinking of going to Maui, go kite surfing, but...
No, 1 year you're going to make a comeback.
Yeah, I really want to go back to 11 cities because it's a special format and it's a lot of really cool people.
Oh, yeah.
So it's one of those things, as we talked about earlier, it's a challenge and it's more than just a race.
I think special is the best way to describe that. That race is insane. If you've never done it, like get onto the 11 cities. That's just, it's like school camp for adults. Sleeping on those old Dutch wooden ships, just suffering for 5 hours together a day.
I tried to sell it to my friend, Polar Bear's brother, Joachim.
Coach.
Tried to send, I wanted to do it as a relay team with him last year, but our team didn't make it to the start line. I sold it as a booze cruise.
Yeah.
Like, we go as a team, we're 5 people, we'll each paddle 1 day each, and then, you can cruise around on the boat and you can have beers and stuff. And I think I might have like twisted it a little bit, but no, the atmosphere is just nuts. It's one of those bucket list events I feel everyone that's serious about paddling should try at some point in their life.
Yeah.
Trev's,
he's on it.
I'd be keen.
I think, I know you've got to get going soon. It's actually past 4. So this has been a good couple of hours. But actually, speaking of booze cruises, I want one story from you before we wrap this up. We don't have the 3 liters of wine that we did the other night, so this is going to be.
You actually can talk now.
So I can actually hold it together until the end. But
was that the reason we couldn't use the other one?
Yeah.
That was a small part of it.
Main reason.
There were some legitimate audio issues, but I also started going goggly eyes towards the end.
Yeah.
But no, I want your last story. I want it to be, what's your best drunken story from SUP?
My best drunken
Not
story?
yours, but what's the best performance you've seen at an after party?
Oh, that's happening.
Because Trevor put in a pretty strong showing this week, but that wasn't really after a race. He was just having a big night out. So what's pick the best race for paddlers letting loose, and pick a best on ground.
It's hard to pick one because there's a lot of good stories, and
There's been
like
a few.
without getting anyone in trouble, basically.
Let's get him in trouble.
I could get. Well, okay. There's one that sticks out clear to me. It's Lost Mills, 2000, and you were there as well. Remember
2013 Lost
second
Mills.
year, 2013.
Yeah.
Lost Mills in Germany, and one thing you got to understand about the SUP community is we're like the racers, at least we're animals on the water. Like we want to kill each other. Like when I was racing Trevor before he retired, I was always like thinking like.
He's a friend.
Well, when we got back on land, everyone was very friendly and you're high-fiving on the finish line. But on the water, it's business. And then when we get back on land, you're high-fiving and then you go to the bar and start having beers. And it's incredible because the animals are still there, but they're talking to each other. And I'm not going to call Jake Jensen an animal, but when I walked into that bar, that night at the Seehof Hotel, and I saw this mountain of Jägermeister bottles just kind of like lined up between him and Connor Baxter. Like, I had a sense that this is going to be one of those nights, I'm not sure who's going to pass out.
I don't think all those Jaeger bottles were paid for either. I won't throw anyone on the bus there, but there's a
suspicious amount of Jägermeister. And basically we got in, and like my crew from Denmark and we got sucked into it. And the night progresses, and like the first casualty of the night is Jake, he had a terrible result, but he was having a blast with all these people. Like Jamie Mitchell was there, and Travis was there. It was one of those big events.
Yeah.
And in fact, like an hour later after I walk in, Jake is kind of normal. Then all of a sudden I look out the window and I see Jake running like a wild bull through the streets chasing Jamie Mitchell. And Jamie's kind of like the guy waving
the matador.
Matador, waving the
So Jake was an animal. He turned into a bull.
He turned into a bull and like wanted to tackle Jamie. I don't know, some internal Australian thing or whatever. And basically it'd been raining crazy outside. And what happens is like it turns into the ultimate spectacle with these two chasing each other, and they're just slipping around. And basically Jamie slips, goes on his ass. Jake tries to follow him, ends up face planting. And if I don't remember wrong, someone ended up in the water.
Jake was in the water.
I
think Jamie fell over into the water as well, but Jake basically just ran into the water.
Right, so then Jake was in the water.
Phone was in his pocket. It was a mess. It was broad daylight. It was like 10 p.m. in the middle of summer.
Before 10 p.m.
He peaked so early.
Jake was, I remember he was duct taped to a chair in his room, and that game over for him.
Jacko had to shower him, I remember that.
And there's a video of it somewhere, but the night did not stop there. And it was kind of like there was just
it went on way too long after that.
There's something inside of all of this, and one person we got to remember, he's not racing so much anymore, Bo O'Brien.
He was the instigator?
His nickname was the Instigator.
Yeah.
Mate.
Classic Bo.
Mate, come on, you can do that, you pussy. And it was pleasant to have a guy like him around because he was always a party starter. And as we were sitting in the bar talking with some of the guys, normally drinking our beers, all of a sudden we hear this rumor that downstairs in the basement of the hotel where there's a bowling alley, all of a sudden there's a hole in the roof of the bowling alley. And I'm not sure...
Remember who did it?
We didn't know who did it at the time, but...
Blame him on the Maui boys.
The Maui boys were definitely on fire.
They're the prime candidates.
Well, it was Bo O'Brien and Connor Baxter then went bowling. Connor had a suspicious look on his face when he came up. And, it was just... That bar tab got out of control that night.
I think it was on my room.
And that's the best thing.
I think it became a running thing that it was on my room every year.
For the next 3 years, after the event, we'd say, oh, let's go bowling. And they asked, like, oh, what room are you staying in? And you were stupid enough every year to tell us your room number.
There's an open bar downstairs, just to paint the picture, and you have to have this honesty system where you ride in a car. Yeah, I had like 37 beers, 18 bottles of wine, and it always ended up on my room.
Yeah.
I wasn't even there yet 1 year, it was still ended up on my room.
Put it on your tab.
I still got to tab it.
But what basically...
I'm blacklisted from Germany.
This story sums up racing very well for me. Like, look, we were animals on the water. We loved pushing each other, and we loved pushing boundaries, and we're all learning.
Yeah.
But we're also young people that just love having fun and celebrating the good times, because it really was, and it still is for the guys that are doing on tour the whole time. It's a family.
Yeah.
And you're traveling, having a blast the whole time. So those parties we had at all the different places was, it was a celebration of where we were, and that's the cool thing of being on tour is every place you go, it's the biggest night of the year for these people. Like whether you're in Bilbao, you're in Osagor, you're in California, like it's always something special. And I can feel like I get all nostalgic and I want to get back into racing.
Yeah, you're not done yet, Viking.
Definitely not done yet.
All right. Well, on that note, I think we.
But I do have to learn how to iron a shirt.
Yeah. His movie literally starts in 2.5 hours, so you gotta get ready. All right, man. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Cheers.
Thanks for the amazing hospitality this week in Denmark. One more party tonight, and then we're.
I hope you don't fall asleep.
Trying to get to Ukraine.
Good luck on the Ukraine, and I hope you don't fall asleep during the
Wouldn't
film tonight.
Wouldn't dream of it.
No, we got some sleep on the train. We're gonna enjoy this one. So cheers, man.
Right on.
See you soon.
Thank you.
All right.